So I'm sure most of you have probably heard about the Resident Evil 1 remake happening again. What's up everybody, this is McStan and welcome back to the channel. If you are confused by that opening statement, this is not a joke. There are rumors saying that Resident Evil 1 will be remade again for the second time. If you're not aware, Resident Evil actually was remade 22 years ago on the GameCube, and in many people's opinions, it's a perfect remake and there doesn't need to be another remake. Well, today I wanted to talk about my thoughts on Resident Evil 1 being remade again, what it could mean for the series, and some things that they could do with another remake of this original title that could shake things up. So without any further ado, let's hop into it and let's talk about the Resident Evil 1 remake and the possibilities that could come. So let's talk about the elephant in the room, and that is the fact that Resident Evil 1 has already been remade, and many people think that the Resident Evil 1 remake, the original one, is a masterpiece or a perfect remake. Now, while I do think the Resident Evil 1 remake is really good and could possibly be a perfect remake, that does not make me not want another Resident Evil 1 remake. I mean, I'm a Resident Evil diehard fan. If you give me a new Resident Evil game, I'm going to play it. I'm going to be excited about it. How could you be upset about getting a new Resident Evil game? And honestly, remaking Resident Evil 1 in the style of the new remakes could be a really good thing. Now, let's talk about how there are so many new fans to the series that have been introduced to Resident Evil from the newer games. I'm talking about Resident Evil 7 all the way through the Resident Evil 4 remake, and these people haven't actually got to experience these older Resident Evil titles, like Resident Evil 1 Remake or Resident Evil 0. So I think it's actually a perfect opportunity for Capcom to introduce these new fans to the original game that started out the series. Now, with that being said, about a year ago, I made a video talking about these remakes and how they kind of started a new timeline where the story differs from the original timeline. And basically, with them remaking the Resident Evil 1 game again, that could actually tie in the entire Resident Evil remake timeline. That's what I dub it, the Resident Evil remake timeline. That could tie everything in. It could actually have a beginning, because right now it starts at Resident Evil 2 with no beginning. Resident Evil 2 is the second game. So Resident Evil 1 being remade and actually showing you how the remake timeline starts is actually a very good thing in my opinion. Now, let's talk about the gameplay, right? So, of course, it's going to be remade in the newer remake style. We're talking over-the-shoulder, full immersion style gameplay, right? Now, I love the tank controls. I love the fixed camera angles. But I gotta be honest, you don't have the full accessibility that you do nowadays with these remake controls, right? You're not fully immersed. Now, of course, those old tank controls and camera angles make the game scary, right? But these new remakes have been scary from time to time. RE2 remake was super scary when I first played it, so, you know, the scary elements definitely can still be there. And after playing Resident Evil 4 Remake, it's honestly the best playing Resident Evil game I have ever played, and I want every single Resident Evil game from here on out to play like Resident Evil 4 Remake. It really is that good. So besides new gameplay, what else could we expect from a new Resident Evil remake? Well, first of all, we gotta talk about it. New story elements. Like I said earlier, all these new remakes have something different story-wise happening in them. And like I said, there's a new timeline. It's a remake timeline. So I definitely would expect new things to happen within the story of Resident Evil 1 if it were to be remade again. Now, this could include changing, character backstories, maybe having, characters die, or introducing new characters, adding new types of enemies, anything is possible with these remakes when it comes to the story, because we gotta think, these older Resident Evil games are very short. They're like 6-hour games. So they have to add more to them in order to, you know, keep up with today's standard of video games, right? Because today we play games, we get like 20 plus hours out of, you know, a single game story. So that's something that we could expect. Now, with that being said, and this is something that I have seen online within the last few days, many people want Capcom to combine Resident Evil 0 and Resident Evil 1 into one game. So essentially, we would have these two original stories combined together, thus making one huge game. Now, it's pretty ambitious, and I don't know if Capcom would actually do something like that. What I do think they would do, though, is possibly adding Resident Evil 0 to the new Resident Evil 1 remake as future DLC. That definitely could happen, and I would actually love to see it. So, like I said, I'm expecting new story elements in that updated gameplay from the remakes. On top of that, I do expect some type of new game mechanic added to this game. If you look at Resident Evil 4 Remake, they added in a crafting system which kind of carried over from Resident Evil Village. So we could definitely see some sort of new game mechanic added into the Resident Evil 1 Remake that wasn't there before. Now, I'm not saying that crafting could be or will be coming to Resident Evil 1, but something similar or something brand new entirely could definitely make an appearance, like dodging or maybe even melee attacks. Those are two things that weren't in the original that I definitely could see being added. Something else we gotta think about with a Resident Evil 1 remake is the addition of new game modes. It's a high possibility that new game modes could be brought into a RE1 remake. I'm talking Resident Evil Mercenaries. I know you guys love Mercenaries, and so do I, and I think it only makes Resident Evil better. I honestly think every single Resident Evil game should have a Mercenaries mode, and honestly, all it does is bring the replayability back to Resident Evil. In the original RE1, and even the remake, didn't have extra modes. They had extra difficulties, but no other modes, and I think bringing in other game modes is a really, really good idea. Of course, Mercenaries doesn't have to be that game mode, but I definitely would love to see it. And for those of you who have been keeping up with Resident Evil leaks and rumors over the years, we have all heard about the Resident Evil 9 development, right? And with that being said, Resident Evil 1 Remake releasing in 2026 most likely means that RE9 will be pushed back even further, most likely to 2028. I know that's a bummer, but from what we've heard about RE9, it's very ambitious, and I don't want them to rush anything on that game. Which brings me to the other elephant in the room, and that is Code Veronica Remake. Every single Resident Evil fan wants a Code Veronica remake, and we were all kind of surprised when we heard about a Resident Evil 1 remake over Code Veronica. Well, in my opinion, the reasoning for this is Code Veronica's story is kind of tricky. And there are many things in that game that just do not sit well with people nowadays. So, with, you know, the sensitive society that we have nowadays, I think Capcom is probably working on and changing a lot of things in the story of Resident Evil Code Veronica. And also that story is kind of a mess if you really think about it. Anyway, this is the part of the video where you come in, sound off below in the comment section, telling me about what you think about the Resident Evil 1 remake happening again. I would love to hear it, and I'll definitely meet you down there. And with all that being said, thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.